I guess.
We're supposed to be from the future, right?
Yes. You were already in the future.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was just arrived.
Great,
Yeah.
great. So, by the way, thanks for making the long trips. I think, but you guys are all over the place all the time, but I think you get the Deep Vein Thrombosis Award on this panel, right? From Bulgaria?
Yeah.
Probably the furthest, or Berlin? I don't know.
I went to Istanbul first. That was fun.
Okay, you win. All right, Martin wins. So, Martin, it was your presentation last year that caused me to think about, let's have a wider conversation. And the wider conversation background, by the way, is the map of Fairyland, the Atlas of Fairyland, which is a beautiful piece in the David Rumsey map collection. So let's hear from Europe, Fairyland. Let's hear from Europe. You want to start with vision or threat?
Threat.
There
Much
is-
more fun.
Oh, Guy-Philippe wants to start with the cybersecurity
way.
guy wants to start with threats.
Speaking of the
Okay,
devil.
all right, Guy-Philippe, in 2 minutes, what's one big threat you're concerned about for the future?
Yeah, because I thought about a lot about the question, and actually one major threat I would say is, I'll be very open and blunt about that. It's basically massive eruption of collective organized violence, what we call 1939 redux, but with cyber and nukes. Rhymes, actually, bizarre. And to me, that is the main threat, and there are different pathways into that type of event that we've lived 80 years ago. One would be perhaps the collective collapse of the environment, but also cyber is a pathway, something I've been dabbling into. But actually, one of the most important issues around that is social inequalities. And actually, I'll refer to one very sobering read I had last year from an American historian, Walter Schiedel, in a book called The Great Leveler, which explains that all through the course of human history, from the time of hunter-gatherers to now, we never were able, as a collective human species, to actually manage a reduction in social inequalities. It always came down to 3 events, basically: war, social revolution, or the plague. And now we're at this, so not very fun. And now we're at this.
So we need a fourth option, basically. We'd like to pick something
and
else.
there's a fourth option. That's my vision, but I'll wait for all the other guys.
All right, yes, wait on that one. Thank you. So, by the way, I'll point out that Guy-Philippe is also a science fiction writer. And is it accurate to say that you started to go deep into cybersecurity in order to support your science fiction writing habit and then became a cybersecurity expert as a result?
Well, very briefly, one led to the other, because basically I came up with a sci-fi book about, hey, we could have war with cyber, and then it got read in Israel to the level of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Right. And that's how I become a researcher and work with INSS in Tel Aviv around those type of topics.
Great, fantastic. Marjorie, one threat.
Well, actually, my threat and vision merged. And speaking of being a fairy tale out of Europe, I don't want to spread or blow any fairy dust into your eyes. My threat and vision is definitely us. I mean, look at it. When you think about us as a tech community, as a tech ecosystem, we are our best enemies and our worst friends. We can actually do what is wise to do nowadays. We have to merge what we have come together as a digital revolution into a digital society. We have to include people. Inclusion is crucial, just for the sake of being a society in 100 years from now. We have lost track of our users / citizens / voters / audiences / consumers, and they can't stand it anymore. That's why you've probably noticed about the Yellow Vest movement something which was really interesting, even though they never said it this way. To me, the very beginning of the Yellow Vest movement was just those people telling us, hey, you guys, we're super happy for you that you're actually part of this so-called digital revolution, society, economy. Guess what? We don't feel we belong. Just for the reason that you left us out there with bullshit jobs at Amazon, Uber, name them. But if you just pay attention, just for this 1 second, we can probably come together and bring the best together to actually be a society. Now, if you have 80% of your population refusing to be part of this future society, basically, we're doomed. So
I want to come back to synthesizing these, inclusion and inequality. I want to come back to that later and ask each of you, if anybody, you don't all have to answer, if anybody has a thought, what's one thing we can do or should be doing, and who should be doing it? We'll come back to that later, okay? Plamen, one threat that's on your mind.
First of all, how many of you know what is pronoia? Raise your hands. Right, so it's quite enough, but you can tell the others, or I can try a very short version. I'm a pronoic, so this is the opposite state of paranoia. So I'm a confirmed believer that there is a global, conspiracy for our own good. Right?
A conspiracy for our own good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So being that, it's funny to answer that question. And of course, the French, they always start with the bad news, right?
Well, I'm the one that asked them.
Well, it's French and a bit of Ashkenazi Jews, put
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have great friends from the Ashkenazi Jews. That's I have the right to say the truth. So being a pronoic, I'm also grateful. And I'll start with that what Rob is doing here is one of the most amazing things, to bring all these wonderful, beautiful minds from all around the world talk about the desirable future that we want to build the way we pave it. So if somebody tells me Chicago, I don't think about the skyline of Chicago. I think about that beautiful mind left on me. So I would like to have some applause for him here in that panel. Because we forget what he's doing for all of us. And now go back to
Blagodaria.
wonderful, wonderful. That's the Webit family. So back to the threats. If there is something that scares me in my pronoic everyday living, it's the fact that very few people, many around here, but very few in the world, realize the state of slavery that we are under. And that comes with the perception of reality. When the slavery was out there were free people and slaves. Currently, we are basically enslaved by our personal data being exposed all around us. And the state of surveillance and manipulation is maybe at its highest. So I would say we're living in the dark ages when it comes to privacy. And that's why at Webit, we are calling this year for an act of freedom, for the right to protect our kids of being prisoners of their own private data.
So this is a question that's changing, and I'd like to take your threat and actually go, and we'll come back to yours later, Martin, but just talk about the privacy issue a little bit, because it looks and feels a little different in the US than it does in Europe.
Does it?
But we're all sort of colliding now and kind of grappling with this. But before I open that question up to each of you, I should point out Plamen mentions Webit. It is the largest tech summit in Eastern Europe, and now this year, and really has catalyzed Bulgaria as a tech country, and that was a force of will. And now you're moving the main event to Valencia, Spain in June. So I'll make sure everybody knows about that. If you'd like to join us, I'll be there, and I can't wait. So what about privacy? Anybody have a thought that might be helpful or hopeful for us?
Well, if you want to go back to the great divide between the US and Europe when it comes to privacy, so in Europe, we've been mastering the art of regulation, right, over the past 2 years, 3 years. And we also have someone at the European Commission who's been reappointed for the next 5 years, Marjorie Paillon, who's now the vice president of the European Commission, who is still commissioner to competition, who's still going to be somehow the nightmare of the Silicon Valley. She's definitely want to get after you guys just for this one reason. Europe, for a long time, was blocked definitely between its will to innovate and its ability to innovate. So at some point, we chose on the path of regulation because to us, it's really important to actually come back to the basics when it comes to privacy. And it's protecting what's our best ability and what our best treasure, for instance.
Marjorie
Our
and
data.
Russ, do you think that the level of regulation has impeded the ability of Europeans to build great tech companies?
At first, yeah.
It's an obvious one. There are actually examples of something where we thought was a good thing, a good step forward was a GDPR. That I
Yes,
guess many people
General
know.
Data
Protection
Regulation.
Regulation. Actually, surprise, surprise, 1 year later, we saw that in the ad tech market in Europe, small companies got screwed by large companies. And then, surprise, surprise again, we hear Mr. Zuckerberg, who's now very much in favor of regulation because it's your typical...
It favors him.
Yes, of course, evidently it favors the biggest. And that's the big issue as we deal with regards to privacy. It's both at the individual level.
Yeah.
How do we keep this sense of agency, which is absolutely fundamental if we want to build so-called resilient societies?
Right.
But that also means at the industrial level, how we manage to keep innovation, which is based most of the time on small teams, small countries, small teams, small units. Yeah. And that's a big issue with regulation in Europe, actually.
Are you seeing any, and then Martin, well, Martin, go ahead.
No, and you can see that granularity going down to privacy, so me as one unit of transformation, if you wish. And we talk about transparency as very good value for any enterprise. We are transparent. You see this on posters and T-shirts. That is not enough. I think we need to be intimate. So I trust you so much, I reveal my vulnerabilities to you. And I trust you won't shoot it for me. Shoot it down, so you win in some way. So I believe the technology has the ability not only to be personalized. This is the Siri for you, this is the iPhone for you, whatever. It must be personal. And we move from transparency to privacy to intimacy. Because intimacy builds this kind of friendship. To be personal, truly personal, only for you, Guy-Philippe.
Only for you, Martin.
In a way that we can trust each other. Because intimacy is not possible. I mean, intimacy without trust, that goes sideways very quick.
We're not allowed to talk about that here on the stage. No.
So I want that. I want technology to make us trust each other like friends do, and to be personal and intimate. So I spent 27 years in Sweden, where we have different kind of view on privacy. I remember my friend bought this first scale you could weigh yourself, and he tweeted for you.
A scale.
Yeah, and people said, dude, I mean, do we really want to know your weight? Yeah, because I want to help from you to lose, 10 kilo, whatever. And then he started to, in the end, long story short, he said, well, try this, let's try this. He posted on Twitter his bank account, which in Sweden you can look up. You can look up taxes and derive what people make. We all know what we make in Sweden.
Okay. Yeah.
So your salary wouldn't be, that of a thing. I said, who cares? You can look that up in the tax authorities, and once people know, yeah, that's true.
Well, I want to jump
Sweden
off from
is doing
here.
that, yeah. But if
Go
you
ahead.
allow me,
Yeah.
I would like to do a step further in this, and let's look at the global picture. We have a shift from unipolar to a multipolar power shift. We see the rise of local superpowers, which that shift allows. And technology, looking at how technology works and going back to this need of act of freedom, there are all these political leaders who started to understand that technology could give them a super powerful manipulation engine for cementing their regimes, or now they're still not called regimes, they're still democratic leaders and leadership, but cementing themselves into power. And this, of course, is disrupting our legal systems, our political systems, our social systems. We call Trump or Boris Johnson the reasons. No, they're a product of this shift that we see. They are not the reason for this. And that's where we are. That's why we need the communities built on shared necessities. Because if we go for the solutions are that communities of people with hearts who get together, who are quite well aware of what is going on, and who have the power, the heart, the will, and desire to build that desirable future that we're aiming at. Mm-hmm. And everything else is a product of it. How many companies will be there? How many great entrepreneurs we will build? Of course, it's about entrepreneurs who give back to communities. It's about entrepreneurs who are good examples, not like the entrepreneur founder of Uber, who is an example of success and terrible example of a human being. That's why he never been invited to Webit, for example. So we have to give examples of people with hearts and values And then technology becomes the tool of freedom.
Well, even
Not the
help
opposite.
people who have hearts to see beyond what Marjorie was saying before. We're in a bubble. The tech space really is in a bubble. Guy-Philippe, you have a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on what's just being said here. You mentioned the element of being personal, and indeed you need to be personal, but as we hold hands together, it's a beautiful metaphor of what we need, and we always do that in any way. The key element is personal and togetherness.
Yes.
Personal and social, and basically rebuild social capital. I started by talking about social inequalities. The way social inequalities are being expressed in the Western world today is not necessarily exactly difference of incomes. It is the case in the US, it's not the case in Europe. But there is an issue with the equal distribution of risk and opportunities, because now we have classes of society which have all the opportunities and classes of societies which have all the risks, and that doesn't work. And linked to that, there's actually a geographical expression of that in terms of all the guys with all the opportunities are in the dense urban areas, and all the guys with all the risk are outside in areas where there's little social capital. And on top of that, what Plamen explained, and part of what I'm researching now for INSS, is we had authoritarian states which try to apply that, not actually to do surveillance state, as Evgeny Morozov may have spoken at the start of his decade, but actually to further destroy social capital, to further disrupt civil society. Why? Because the only way you can actually push against an authoritarian leader is if you have a forum, a civil society, groups of people getting together. And they know that. And that's why by the mid-2010s, with the help perhaps of some of our Russian friends and active measure stuff, they managed to use guys like stuff like Facebook and other social media to actually disrupt civil society. And what we need to do today now, as tech guys, is to find all the ways to fix that issue and to bring people together to develop social capital.
Here. By the way, if you're interested in this, read Ethics of Authenticity by Charles Taylor, a short, stunning book from 1993, and the 10th chapter, Against Fragmentation, talks about exactly what's going on right now. Martin, you've been wanting to jump in.
Yeah, it connects back. So the trust and transparency creates an allowance to tell your intimate story. And we heard from the panel just before, one story at a time. That's how you weave the fabric of what future you carry already within you. And that trust, so what we're doing today, and that would be my biggest threat, is that we outsource the future. We are the consumers, like it was a soda. And that's what happens when you separate the discussion. And you align with others' visions or the lack of it. And that's, for me, the lack of the storytelling. It's the cancer of short-termism. I am here. You will fix the future. Either you're an institution, a business, or a religion, and I outsource that to you. And you forget one important thing in that story. You forget that we live in the history of the future to come already.
We live in the history of the future to come. Whoa, okay. All right, Hegel, tell us what we're talking about.
Yes, and that's, speaking of Hegel, we had it in the discussion before. We are so focused on being. I am here, you guys doing that stuff, and whatever, countryside, city, surveillance, I'm not there, China doesn't touch me. What about becoming? What about, who am I wanting to become?
Yeah.
And that is a never end. We talk about growing up. It's a wrong metaphor. We will never grow up. It's not a trap. It's not happening. It's end of growing up. We will always be kids. We will always be becoming. So I don't remember who said it, that human is not, it's a verb. Right? Maybe, if you're lucky, you become human at last. And we forget that discussion.
Well, this is a personal, what you're talking about is an existential notion of personal responsibility.
Correct.
To stand up and make a decision to live a certain kind of life or make certain decisions in
The
your
protagonist of your own future rather than the consumer of someone's.
Well, the
Yes.
man in
But
the
if I
arena.
might add here, though, because trust is a little bit overstated because it's manipulated. And that's
It's
again,
manipulatable, you
yes,
said? Okay.
yes. And then you go back again to the act of freedom and being surveilled. I mean, as long as I have access to to your Alexa and I am able to play some sounds while you're sleeping, as long as I know the value chain of how you access to products for food for your household,
The trust.
I can make you do many things, unfortunately,
Yes.
and we all know it. I can disrupt your diet. I can make you think and dream of things that we want. For example, use exactly that toothpaste. But because I see only 5 minutes left and 25 seconds more, I would like to make a little bit more interesting that discussion, even though it's amazing, and I'm so happy to be with these wonderful panelists. I would like to add one more threat and opportunity, and it's, we all talk about GMO. We all know what it is, but it's about food. How about gene editing? How about creating superhumans? How about getting rid of a lot of problems? And how about creating abundance of new? So if we talk
You've
about
just introduced
a trajectory
an
of
entirely new
social...
channel.
If we talk about the trajectory of
coming,
social
Plamen.
abundance, which is what I believe in, and that's what our global community, we have 800,000 people part of the Webit community, and we build that trajectory of global abundance, at least we want to project it. But how about that? So we have on the one side privacy and our free will, which is no longer free. Maybe it's never been free, but now it's much more manipulable, including the trust. And then we have the new opportunities of a new humankind, getting rid of anything that is now disrupting our health, improving our own selves, growing into the homo deuses, and what does it bring to the table, and how? So I think these are the two things that are the biggest challenge for us.
And opportunity. Their challenge
Oh,
and
absolutely.
opportunity.
So
So Marjorie,
basically,
Guy-Philippe, and then I want
Yeah.
your quick one vision for the future in 1 minute or less after.
in
But so
3 minutes
Marjorie,
and 47 seconds. Okay,
well,
so
just
basically,
I'll cut you some slack.
yeah, so basically,
Marjorie and
we
Guy-Philippe.
have two options here. We can humanize with Martin, or we can cyborg, or be cyborging with
You're a
with Plamen.
cyborg. Show the
I'm a
people.
cyborg,
No, stand
exactly.
up, please. Show the people. No, please.
No,
Turn around, please. Turn around.
It's a
Look at her.
microphone.
Look at
Just
her.
a
She has
microphone.
something on the back. Oh, it's a microphone? Oh, my
It's a
God.
I
mic.
could
You
lit-
cyborg too, you also have a mic.
My bad.
I could
All right.
literally be a deep fake and you wouldn't know so.
Yeah.
basically. But anyway, so I mean, this is a crucial choice we have to make. We're on the threshold of
Yeah.
actually positioning ourselves between those two options. Which one would you go for, guys? Would you like to be more human or more cyborgs? And just waiting for your answers.
Guy-Philippe?
My answer is slightly different from that, but I'll take a contrarian view, if I may, to what Plamen has just said, in the sense that if we push the machine with further opportunities, but they are not properly distributed among the collective, what we call the human species, we'll go back to either war or social conflict or whatever. And again, we see that with the yellow vest. If we're not able to actually build the technology of making a society which will be more inclusive, more resilient, then whatever we're pushing that machine forward, it will be against a wall. And we will see that disappearing, because we've already seen that 80 years ago. And we'll always have the risk of that running again.
Yes, I've spent a lot of time reading about not just the war, but what particularly interests me is the interwar period,
Yes,
the period
absolutely.
between 1 and 2. We can talk more about that later. Martin, what is your one vision for the future?
It is completion.
What does this mean?
It means that once we get our shit together and start talking one story at a time, and have the intimacy to do so, and the allowance to be intimate, we can complete each other, which is the opposite to competition, which we have today. So through complementarity, so 1, 2, we get to 1 more, oh, complete, we can do stuff. So I believe in somehow the death of corporations in that sort of enterprise in that sense, they will pop up and disappear according to need. Because we need this, complementarity will come in, we will complete that circle, move on.
Somehow
Then-
related to shared necessities.
Yes, yes. So I believe in the superhuman, the empowered me. But as we discussed earlier, the me flipped upside down becomes a we very quickly, yeah? And we, me, ecosystems of complementarity, completion instead of competition
Great.
are the future.
So, completion. Guy-Philippe, one vision.
Resilience. Resilient societies, which is based on two things. resilient structures, which have lots of echoes of what's been said by Safi, Bekal yesterday, but also I could come back to Ernst von Molk and Auftrags Taktik and the ability to build up structure with small autonomous units and with a common vision, what we call in France liberté, égalité, fraternité. Autonomy, liberty, equality, redistribution, fraternité, the common vision. And resilient narratives, we were talking about the futures.
Resilient
narratives, which means, there are a couple of Finnish people here. There's one very interesting word in Finnish, which is sisu.
Sisu?
Sisu. Does anyone know sisu? They know sisu. They know what I mean. Back in 1940,
Good for them.
What is it?
Let me explain. Let me explain. And in English.
This is the French way, you know?
With a little French
Putting
accent.
things.
That's true.
So
Back to Sisu.
Sisu is this ability that you may know that you have strength beyond what you know. And that is somehow the ability, okay, I'm summing up, and I'm sure that my Finnish friends will not be happy with what I've said. But it's the ability to know that you can overcome obstacles. And that's why you're able to see negative futures, because you're not afraid of those. And because then you can start thinking about how I'm going to solve the problems which are coming our ways.
So this is why we argue that negative futures first or the positive.
Always. But for that, you need Sisu.
I love that argument. Is it over now? Okay.
Sorry, yeah.
Great. Sisu, Marjorie.
Well, it's definitely, again, back to the basics and the merging of threats and visions. I mean, the tool will be occlusion, right? So now, do we actually want to overcome, the wall we're actually, going to bang our heads to? Or do we actually be more inclusive and bring together those forces and feedbacks that are going to basically make us a society as a whole? So it's definitely trying to have this vision for the future where we'll still be human or cyborgs, but included all together.
Both and. It won't be the robots against the humans.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be us against us.
With
Or
intelligence.
with
Et en
us,
même
for
temps,
us.
très français.
Plamen,
Très français.
vision for the future.
Well, I think people are afraid of the future because of the lack of self-confidence in general. So there's nothing to be afraid. It's all about understanding. So first, to understand the current situation. I said it's a middle age, and it's slavery. And we in Bulgaria say, the slave fights for freedom, the free man fights for perfection. So that's where we are at that trend of going into where we belong to. Our aim of creating a perfection. Perfection between us as human beings, perfection between us and the nature. What we see now is us destroying the nature. And that's where AI will help us a lot, understanding that killing each other is not human. Killing the other species is not human. Killing nature is not at all.
How will AI help us do that?
Well, for the first time in the human history, indeed, we are at the crossroads of creating something that might turn out in not very near future cleverer than us. It's the game of gods. And of course, being a god is not an interesting thing at all, and it's, I believe, a very tough thing, and some of us realize that. It's so much responsibilities for these down there.
Yeah.
So we have to take care of our own future, and that thing that could turn out better than us could be our game changer of understanding what we are doing on a mass scale. All people here do understand where we are. All our community, what we are discussing also at Webit, at scale, we want more people to understand inclusion and resilience. So at the moment, we get a competitor, because it's all about competition. We are now at the top of the pyramid. We have nobody that treats us. We are like the tuna fish.
It'll be
tuna
horrible.
fish eats every other fish. That's why it's not very healthy to eat tuna fish these days, because a lot of heavy metals in there because of,
Well, and it's not great to be at the top of the pyramid if the pyramid's falling apart.
Yes, indeed.
Plamen,
So
we
that's
need the
where AI
confidence.
will help us.
We need the confidence to build resilient societies that are inclusive, that lead us to an ongoing, ever-going completion. Marjorie, you said, do what's wise. Plamen, I'm on your side. I hope you're right that there is a conspiracy for our own good going on. Martin, transparency will be a tricky thing, and it will define a lot of the change going on the rest of the century. Inclusion, intimacy, freedom. In a world where technology can increasingly do anything, and it can, the question for each of us is, what should we do and why?
Allow me
Thank
to
you
add one
very
more
much.
thing before you.
No.